So far, we have discussed about the introduction part of statistics. Now, we shall discuss about measures of central tendency. So, condensation of the statistical the data is very necessary in statistical the analysis, and this is because a large number of big figures are not only confusing but also difficult to analyze. So therefore, in order to reduce the complexity of the data and to make them comparable, it is necessary that the various phenomena which are being compared and which are reduced to a single figure. So the first of such measures is the averages or the measures of central tendency. So therefore, measures of central tendency is a typical value of the entire group or the data. So therefore, it measures of central tendency which describes the characteristics of the entire mass of the data. So the basic purpose of the statistical analysis is to condensation and as well as to determine the value which represents to determine the value one single value that represents the entire the frequency distribution or the whole series. So this value is termed as the central value or an average, or in other words, average is a statistical measure which represents a group of individual values in simple and comprehensive manner. So therefore, measures of central tendency, the measures of central tendency means or the its measures of central tendency or an average is a it is a it is a value, single value, it is a single value, it is a single value which depicts the entire set of frequency distribution, and it measures the central the value or central the tendency, and it is the process of calculating the single value of the entire frequency distribution or the whole series. Now, measures of central tendency or a combination of two words. It is a combination of two words, that is measure and central tendency. One is measure and another one is central tendency. Therefore, it is a combination of two words, measure and central tendency. And measure means methods, and central tendency means an average value of any statistical series. So therefore, it is a method of finding a single value known as an average of the given of the entire the frequency distribution or given set of the values or the whole series. So therefore, we can say that central tendency means the methods of finding how the central value, or it is the process of finding a central value or an average value of a statistical series of the quantitative the information. So uh, uh, therefore therefore an average an average is a single value which depicts the entire the given values, or which depicts or which shows the entire set of frequency distribution or or the whole series. Now, definition of averages. So, measures of central tendency or averages have been defined differently by different statisticians or the authors. So, according to Clark, average is an attempt to find one single figure which describes the whole of figures. So according to Clark, average, it is an attempt, it is a value which it is a value which shows or which depicts the whole of the figures or the entire set of the data or mass of the data or information. So therefore it is an attempt to find one single figure which describes one single figure, that figure which describes the whole of figures is called as an average. And a measure of central tendency is a typical value around which other figures congregate. So this is another the definition which had been given by Simpson and Kafka. So according to Simpson and Kafka, an average refers to a measure of central tendency. An average or a measure of central tendency is a typical value around which other figures, other the values or other figures congregate, or other figures which depend upon a typical value. And an average stands for the uh, whole group of which it forms a part, it represents the whole. So according to AE Wag, an average or measures of central tendency refers to an average or the value stands for the whole group of the stands for whole group of which it forms a part. So means it is a value which stands or which shows of the whole group of the data of which it forms a part, or it is a part of the value of the whole group of the figures or the data, and it represents the whole group of the information or the data or set of the data. So therefore an average is a single value which depicts or which shows the entire the entire set of data or the whole group of the information. Now, requisites of a good measure of central tendency. Now, let us know what are the requisites of a good measure of central tendency or an average. So, here some of the requisites which are mentioned, it should be rigidly defined. It should be rigidly defined, and it should be simple to understand and easy to calculate. It should be based upon all the values of given data, and it should be capable of further mathematical treatment, and it should have sampling stability, and it should not be unduly affected by extreme values. So these are some of the requisites. It should be rigidly defined, it should be clearly defined, and it should be simple to understand and easy to calculate, and even a non-mathematical person can able to understand and easy to calculate. And an average should be based upon all the values of a given data, and it should be capable of further mathematical treatment, and it should have sampling stability, and it should not be unduly affected by extreme values. So these are some of the requisites of a good measure of central tendency or an average. Now, objectives of measuring central tendency. So, what are the objectives of measures of central tendency or measuring central tendency? There are various the objectives of measuring central tendency. They are The first one is that representative of the group. So representative of the group, the first objective of measuring central tendency, and here an average represents all the figures or all the uh, futures or all the figures of a group. Hence, the results about the whole group can be reduced from it. So, this is the first objective of measuring central tendency or an average, because means an average which represents all the figures of a group. Therefore, the results about that whole group can be reduced, because a mass of the data cannot be understood clearly, and and that mass of the data should be reduced by calculating or reduced for through means of an averages or an averages, because in order to understand clearly that set of the data and analyzing that data, so we have to reduce that mass of the figures by through means of the statistical tools, like tools and techniques like an averages. So therefore an average which represents all figures of a group, so therefore it represents of the entire group. So that results which shows the whole group. Now, brief description. An average gives has simple and brief description of the main features of the whole data. Brief, it describes or it gives us simple. An average gives us simple and a brief description of the main features of the whole data. ಸೊ ಏನು ಒಂದು ಮಾಸ್ ಡಾಟಾ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಹ್ಯೂಜ್ ಸೆಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಡಾಟಾ ಏನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಹೋಲ್ ಡಾಟಾ ಏನು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿರ್ತಾರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂ ರೆಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಮತ್ತು ಬ್ರೀಫ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. Because instead of saying the marks of each and every subject in second PU or in first semester of the BCom, so we can say that the average, the percentage of mark, say 75%, 80%, 90%. So that percentage of the result which shows, which depicts the entire uh, result of that semester. So this is what an average gives us, simple and brief description and helpful in comparison. So measures of central tendency are an average which reduces the data to a single value, which is highly useful for making comparative studies. So we can compare. Comparison is possible in an averages or measures of central tendency, because it reduces the data. So when it reduces the data, uh, uh, reduces the data, so that data, when it reduces single value, when it reduces to a single value, then and that single value can be compared from one data to another data, or 1 year to another year. So which is highly useful for making comparative studies. For example, comparing the per capita income of two countries. So the per capita income of one country to another country, so we can compare such the data. So therefore an averages or measures of center tendency which helps to compare the data of one to another. So therefore we can conclude that which country is richer. So this is possible in measures of central tendency or an averages. Now helpful in formulation policies. So this is another the objective of the measures of central tendency, and an averages help to develop a business in case of a firm, or help the economy of a country to develop. So we can formulate certain some policies on the basis of on the basis of an average, because an average which helps to formulate certain policies, because an average or is a single value. An average is a single value, that single value which depicts the entire the set of data. So then we can formulate certain policies, or we can frame certain the policies. So some sort of the policies can be framed, no, or an average which helps to make some the the policies or schemes for the economy of a country, or to develop some ಆ ಪಾಲಿಸಿಯನ್ನು ಫಾರ್ಮುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಆನ್ ಆವರೇಜ್ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ಒಂದು ದೇಶದ ಒಂದು ಎಕಾನಮಿ ಅಥವಾ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಪರ್ಪಸ್ಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಪಾಲಿಸೀಸನ್ನು ಫಾರ್ಮುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಒಂದು ಒಂದು ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂ ಏನಿದೆ, ಆ ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂನೇ ನಾವು ಆವರೇಜ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಆವರೇಜನ್ನು ಆವರೇಜ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂ, ಆ ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂವನ್ನು ಬೇಸ್ ಆಗಿಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಪಾಲಿಸೀಸನ್ನು ಫಾರ್ಮುಲೇಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. So base of other statistical analysis. So other statistical devices such as mean deviation, coefficient of variation, correlation, analysis of time series, and index numbers are also based on the averages. So these are some statistical the devices such as mean deviation, coefficient of variation, CV, correlation, regression, and analysis of time series, index numbers. These are called as statistical devices. ಇವೆಲ್ಲವನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಟಿಸ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಡಿವೈಸಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಟಿಸ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಟೂಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಮೆಥಡ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಡಿವೈಸಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ಅಥವಾ ಟೂಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಟಿಸ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಡಿವೈಸಸ್ ಆರ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಟಿಸ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ದ ಟೂಲ್ಸ್ ವಿಚ್ ಆರ್ based on the averages. ಬೇಸ್ಡ್ ಆನ್ ದಿ ಆವರೇಜಸ್ನ ಬೇಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಅವು ಒಂದು ರಿಸಲ್ಟನ್ನು ಕೊಡುತ್ತೆ. Now, to present a brief picture of the data. So, to present a brief picture of data, another the statistic, another the measures of central, the objectives of measures of central tendency. So, or an average. So, it helps in giving a brief description of the main feature of the entire data. So an average or measures of central tendency which helps to give a brief description of the main feature of the entire the data. ಆ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಡಾಟಾಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟ ಹಾಗೆ ಒಂದು ಬ್ರೀಫ್ ಡಿಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಷನನ್ನು ಈ ಮೆಜರ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಸೆಂಟ್ರಲ್ ಟೆಂಡೆನ್ಸಿ ಲೈಕ್ ಆವರೇಜ್ ಕೊಡುತ್ತೆ. So this is another objective of measures of central tendency. Now helps in decision making. So this is another the important the objective of measures of central tendency or an average. So most of the companies are using measures of central tendency to plan and develop their business economy. So because an average or central tendency which gives us a single value. So on the single value, so based on that single value, so we can make some plans, or we can develop we can make some development of the business, or we can formulate some the policies or schemes for future for the development of the business concern. So some policies we can make, we can formulate certain policies for the development of the business or businesses the economy. So this is the most important. The objective of measures of central tendency are an average, because most of the companies are using measures of central tendency to make some plans and to develop their business economy. Now, types of measures of central tendency. So there are uh, five measures of central tendency. Mainly, there are five measures of central tendency. They are arithmetic mean, geometric mean, harmonic mean, mode, and median. So these are uh, mainly five types of measures of central tendency.